This is our first video for our ecology unit. Ecology is defined as the study of how living things interact with each other and with their environment. If you think about it, behavior is right at the heart of this definition. This is video 4.1 on animal behavior. Animal behavior encompasses a lot. This video will cover these two objectives: contrasting innate and learned behaviors and proximate and ultimate causes of behaviors. You'll learn a lot about specific behaviors from the videos that you and your classmates will be making and sharing with each other. An easy, simplified definition for behavior is just a response to a stimulus, but we can refine that by adding a few nuances. A more precise definition for behavior is an observable, coordinated response to environmental stimuli. You can classify behaviors based on a couple of different things. One broad classification of behavior is innate behavior. Innate behaviors are instinctive, meaning that the organism knows how to do the behavior without having to learn the behavior. The behavior is done correctly the first time the organism encounters the stimulus, and the behavior is usually done exactly the same every time. In other words, innate behaviors are pretty rigid and unchanging. Innate behaviors are also inherited because they're hardwired into the DNA. But even though the behavior is coded in the DNA, the organism still needs to encounter the stimulus to do the behavior. And finally, innate behaviors usually involve basic life functions like survival and reproduction. In other words, if a behavior is so important that doing the behavior wrong may cost an organism its life or ability to mate, the behavior is probably innate. One example of innate behavior is shown down here. Did you know that bird migration is innate? If you put a bird in captivity during the time when the bird is supposed to migrate, the bird becomes restless, having increased activity in trying to fly away. What's more, the movement of the bird will be specifically in the direction where the bird is supposed to migrate. Migration is innate behavior. So how can researchers determine if a behavior is innate and encoded in the DNA? Well, to do this, scientists study naive animals, which are animals that have been raised in captivity and haven't been exposed to the stimulus that you're trying to study. One study looked at the digging behavior in deer mice and beach mice. Deer mice and beach mice are closely related and can interbreed, but they don't interbreed in nature because they live in different environments. What's interesting is the deer mice and beach mice have different digging behaviors to make their burrows. Deer mice dig a small, short burrow, and beach mice dig a long burrow with an escape tunnel to get away from predators. Researchers raised mice in the lab and gave them no opportunity to burrow. When they finally gave the naive adult mice sand, each mouse dug exactly the same type of burrow made by its species in the wild. Since the mice made their normal tunnels, even without ever seeing a tunnel before, it showed that burrow digging behavior was indeed innate. Interestingly, when they crossed a deer mouse with a beach mouse, the hybrid offspring made burrows in the beach mouse style. So escape tunnel digging is a dominant genetic trait. In contrast to innate behaviors, learned behaviors are shaped by experience and how an organism interacts with its environment. Don't get me wrong, learned behaviors aren't completely disconnected from DNA. You see, the ability to learn is a complex process that's definitely controlled by the actions of a lot of genes, but the learned behavior itself isn't genetically hardwired. Here's a classic example of learned behavior. In this experiment, a naive, captive blue jay was fed a monarch butterfly. Monarch caterpillars feed on milkweed and accumulate toxic chemicals from milkweed in their bodies. And even as an adult butterfly, the toxins remain at high levels. About 10 minutes after eating the monarch, the blue jay has a violent reaction and vomits. And after this one encounter, the blue jay learned to change its eating behavior, avoiding monarchs altogether. When you think about behaviors, Heck, when you think about biology, I want you to see everything through the lens of evolution. So with behaviors, it's important to think of the adaptive value of behaviors. Adaptive value is just a fancy way of analyzing how a behavior or trait increases the fitness of organisms. Remember, fitness is the ability of an organism to survive and reproduce. So every behavior can be connected to the ability of an organism to survive and or reproduce. It's important to make deliberate connections here when you're thinking about behaviors and evolution. You can make a huge case for the adaptive value of innate behaviors. Innate behaviors save time. Saving time is important when an organism has a short lifespan that must be dedicated to finding mates to maximize fitness. Also, an innate behavior like a startle reflex can save time when it comes to reacting to life-threatening dangers. Innate behaviors can save energy. Energy isn't wasted doing the behavior incorrectly and having to learn and shape that behavior over and over again. So less energy means less time trying to find food and potentially more time and energy dedicated towards reproduction. Innate behaviors are critical when one mistake can have huge consequences on fitness. Innate behaviors are advantageous in two other circumstances: when an organism is solitary and can't learn by watching other organisms, and if the stimulus is always the same and the response is appropriate, why change that? I want you to think about how you can deliberately connect each of these advantages to survival or reproduction, and talk about how innate behaviors are evolutionarily advantageous. Learned behaviors also have adaptive value. The top reason that learned behaviors are valuable is because an organism can change to fit a changing environment. In other words, what it takes to survive and reproduce in one time and place may change in another time or at another place. Learned behaviors tend to occur in social organisms with longer lifespans. With longer lifespans and kind of role models, there is not as intense of pressure on reproduction, and there's more time for an organism to learn behaviors, and learn behaviors from organisms that have proven evolutionary success in that environment at that time and in that place. Here's a graphic to drive a point home. On the left y-axis is the percentage of innate behaviors, and on the right y-axis is the percentage of learned behaviors. There's a pattern here. You can see the innate behaviors in red going down from left to right, and the learned behaviors as this dashed line going up from left to right. On the x-axis are a bunch of different kinds of animals organized from the most simple organisms to more complex organisms. And here's the pattern. Relatively simple organisms with short lifespans have more innate behaviors and less learned behaviors. More complex organisms with longer lifespans have more learned behaviors and less innate behaviors. The next thing that I want to introduce is how to analyze the cause of behaviors. Behavior ecologists break down behavior into two causes: proximate cause and ultimate cause. Proximate cause is how a behavior works, and ultimate cause is why the behavior is evolutionarily favored. Think of proximate cause as a description of the stimulus and physiology of the behavior. The stimulus is what triggers or causes the behavior to be set off in the first place. Physiology is just how an organism's anatomical parts have changed function as a result of the stimulus. Ultimate cause is essentially the same as adaptive value. When analyzing the behavior, how is the behavior connected to increase survival and or reproduction of the species? I think some examples will clarify proximate and ultimate cause. We'll do one here and we'll do some others in class. A classic example is mating songs in songbirds. It's only during mating season that the male songbirds will sing. So, what's the proximate and ultimate cause of the singing behavior? Remember, proximate cause is describing the stimulus and the physiology of the behavior. In this case, the stimulus is the changing seasons. Changing seasons causes the physiological response of increased testosterone. The increased testosterone, in turn, signals specific brain areas responsible for singing to become active. The ultimate cause is the adaptive value of the behavior. How does singing increase survival or reproduction? The mating song serves two purposes. First, the mating song signals to receptive females that there's a male in the area. By using an auditory signal, the male doesn't have to see the female in order to attract her. Instead, she can come to him. Increased chance of finding mates will increase the chance for successful reproduction. Moreover, having a mating song can warn other males that a certain territory is already taken. Warning other males can reduce competition and having to chase away these males, freeing up more time and energy for finding mates and reproducing. You can kind of think of ultimate cause as a CER for why this behavior increases the fitness of organisms, where the claim is singing during breeding season increases the fitness of male songbirds. And the evidence and reasoning below. If you want, pause the video and check this out. It may help you understand ultimate cause even better. So this video is all about animal behaviors. Animal behaviors are how organisms respond to stimuli, especially to each other and their environment. We talked about innate behaviors and learned behaviors. Innate behaviors are behaviors that are genetically hardwired and important when the behavior needs to be done right the first time and every time in response to a non-changing stimulus. Learned behaviors, however, are shaped by the environment. They're important when organisms need to be able to adapt to changing environments. Finally, analyzing behaviors uses a system of analyzing proximate causation, which are the stimuli in the physiology, and ultimate causation, which is the adaptive value or evolutionary advantage of the behavior.